We've got some old folklore on the moor as well. There's the story of sad Kitty J. Again, this is a type of ghost story, although she doesn't haunt much these days. Kitty J was a young girl back in about the 1500s who was hard done by a lord of the manor of that area. She lived in a place called Mannerton, and she got pregnant. And because of this, she couldn't, at that time, you know, it was a stigma attached to it and everything, and she couldn't handle this. So she killed herself, she committed suicide. And of course in those days, if you were a suicide, they wouldn't bury you in consecrated ground. They had to bury you somewhere outside the village on a crossroads, so that if your spirit arose, it wouldn't know which road to take to get back to the village and haunt the people. So Kitty J was buried on a crossroads near Mannerton. And in about 1860, her story had gone on over the centuries about this young girl, Kitty J. And in 1860, a man was digging the road out there, and he found some bones. Now, of course, he couldn't tell whether they were the bones of Kitty J, because at that time they didn't have the forensic science to do it. But he decided that this would be Kitty J. So being a very compassionate man, he took the bones and he took them to a side of the road into Mannerton, and he buried them. And he put a grave there. And to this day, that grave is still there. However, every day there are fresh flowers on that grave, and no one will admit who puts them there. Obviously the person who does it knows, but nobody else knows who puts them there. And Kitty J has been seen in Mannerton ever since 1860. So she's got back home. That's Kitty J. We've got a tomb not far from here. Between the two pubs, the Plymouth Feathers and the railway, and there's a road goes up onto the moor. And as you get to the top of there, you can see what's known as Child's Tomb. Now, it's nothing to do with children. Child, it was C-H-I-L-D-E, and child was an old word for a traveller and a hunter. And it's said that this was a hunter of the Viking days who'd gone up there. He was on the moor, and he'd got a horse, and the snow had come in, the bad weather had come in, so to try and preserve himself, he killed his horse and then cut the carcass and climbed inside to keep warm. However, it didn't work, he died. And he was found by some monks who were travelling across. And the monks, he'd written a note before he died saying that he was Lord of the Manor of so-and-so, and whoever buried his body in consecrated ground would have that manorship. So these monks found him, and they picked the body up and started to take it back to their monastery in Tavistock. However, there were some monks coming from across the moor at Plimpton, and they found them, started talking to them, asked them what they were doing, and then they jumped on them and took the body and took it back to Plimpton. So all of the inheritance is now in Plimpton. But they then built a tomb on the moor, and it's a very high, it's about a 9-foot high memorial to Charles Tomb. Unfortunately it got damaged a few years ago, but it's now been restored. And it's said he's still there, an old Viking warrior up on the moor. We hear lots of stories of the moor. There's a story of an old mine, a gold mine, called Chore Gully Mine. And it's said that it was closed down many, many years ago because there was evil spirits in it. And it said that some lads afterwards, there was still quite a load of the gold in there, and some lads tried to get down it by just using a rope, tying it around a tree and going down on a rope. And it's said that about a third of the way down, a hand came out of the side and cut the rope, and they fell to their deaths. However, the next morning the bodies were on the surface because the evil spirits couldn't live with Christians. Chore Gully Mine. It's all true, this, you know. These true stories, these. Shut up, Tom. Right, the B3212, the road we were going down. That's reputedly the most haunted road in Devon. There's a story going back centuries on that road called the Hairy Hands story. Right? You're going to be travelling back on that road later. So remember this. It's said, going way back to when it was just horse and cart or riding a horse, that every so often someone on that road, no matter what vehicle or mode of transport they were in, two hairy hands would grab theirs on the steering wheel or the reins or the handlebars and pull them off to the side and crash the vehicle. Now, this has been going on for years and people have been reporting this. And the last one I remember was a young Royal Air Force officer. In fact, no, he wasn't an officer, he was a sergeant. And he was riding his motorbike from Princetown along that road, past 2 bridges and up to Morton Hampstead. And on his way back, the hairy hands got him, pulled him off the road, crashed the bike. And of course this was a service motorbike, so he had to report it to the Royal Air Force, that he'd broken their little machine. So he reported to the Royal Air Force. 2 hairy hands grabbed mine on my handlebars and pulled me off to the side of the road. Now that would be funny in itself, but the funny thing is the Royal Air Force accepted this explanation. However, let me tell you this. In Princetown we've got 3 pubs. In 2 bridges there's another pub. In Postbridge, which is further on, there's another pub. And a bit further on from that there's another pub. And in Morton Hampstead there's at least 5. Now wouldn't that be a good excuse? I was driving along, boss, and the hairy hands got me. Not I was drunk. There's also another place along there called the Watchin Place. Now there's about 3 explanations for this. Back in the 1400s we used to have a highwayman down here called John Hass, very famous chap, or should I say infamous. And it's said that the Watchin Place is where he used to sit in the hedge and watch for his next victim so he could jump out at them. Well and good, could be true. Another explanation, also in the 1400s, we had the plague in Britain, we had the Black Death. And if a family or a community caught the Black Death, then they were ostracised, they were put all together, quarantined basically. But the people from a nearby cottage or village would look after them, and they'd do this by taking food and provisions to a road near theirs and leaving it there. Then they would go back away and watch. And if the people came out of the house and got the provisions, then they would bring more the next day. However, if they didn't come out of the house, then they were presumed dead, so they would go and burn the house down. So that could be another explanation for the Watchin Place. However, also along that road, there used to be a gibbet, a gallows, where criminals were hanged. And of course in those days you could be hanged for anything, stealing a loaf of bread, but you were considered a criminal. Now when they hanged you in those days, they didn't just hang you and then take you down and bury you. They left you there to deter other people from becoming criminals. So, as everybody knows, if you know anything about witches, the best thing a witch can have for a bruise and spells and concoctions is the dead body of a criminal. And people believed that in those days. So the family of the person who'd been hanged would sit by and watch the body to stop the witches getting it. That's my explanation. That's the one I like. We've got a lady down in Tavistock. As I said, Tavistock's about 8 miles away. I don't know whether you've been there today. I don't know where you've been this week, but you probably haven't. Don't remember it. You probably blinked as you went through it. But in Tavistock, there's a stone gateway, and it's the gateway to Fitzford House. And it used to be a big estate in Tavistock. Now, there used to be a lady who ran that place. Her name was Lady Howard of Fitzford. And she was actually a relation of the John Fitz that I told you about earlier, from the Wells. But that's by the by. Anyway, Lady Howard of Fitzford was a very stern woman, and she ruled her estate with a rod of iron. And it's said that she was a very horrible woman. And this actually comes out proof because she got through 4 husbands. She murdered 4 husbands by poisoning. So it's said that her penance for this is to go out of Fitzford Gate every Midsummer's Eve at midnight in a coach made of bones with headless horses and a headless driver and 4 skulls on the corners of the coach representing the 4 husbands. And at the front of her is a big black dog with red eyes. And they ride all the way from Tavistock to Oakhampton. It's about 17 miles. When they get to Oakhampton, they go to the castle, and the dog picks a blade of grass from the castle and takes it back to Tavistock and plants it in Tavistock. And the penance will end when all the grass from Oakhampton has been transferred to Tavistock. She goes once a year for 1 blade of grass. So don't be in Tavistock at midnight on Midsummer's Eve, because she'll take you with her.